Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to another lovely episode of Plugged In from YAA Electric. My name is Justin Fisher, and today I'm joined by the one and only Zach Shevska. How are you?
Man, I need to do intros over on the Ray and Zach channel like you for daily news you can use. That was really good. Happy Monday. I'm great.
Yeah, I guess I listened to too much NPR, got those intros down. Yeah. Well, I hope you had a good weekend. Anything exciting happened this weekend?
Literally nothing exciting.
Yeah.
I had a pretty good weekend though. Everything was good. Saw a Lucid Air on the highway. Damn good looking cars, honestly. But yeah, nothing too crazy. How about you?
Well, my dad's here. So he's been
Nice.
experiencing an electric vehicle for the very first time ever. I mean, he's seen them on the road, but he's been hesitant to drive it. It's definitely a learning curve for anyone who steps into an EV for the first time. However, I think it's really cute how he asks to plug in my car. Like anytime I got to plug it in at home, he's like, "Let me do it."
Really?
He loves plugging it in. That's really cute. But
If you don't mind me asking, is your dad in his 70s?
no, he's about to turn 60.
Whoa. Okay. Well, your dad and my dad, it's like similar age range. I feel like that's the generation that's got a little bit of apprehension about going towards EVs. And part of the reason why is because EVs cost so much, Justin. I know we're going to start out today's show talking about how expensive EVs are, but also I'm glad your dad's around and can experience your Ionic 5. That must be pretty cool.
Yeah, we've got plenty to talk about today. Some new data from ISeeCars is honestly quite depressing, but it's the reality we live in 2022. Uh, any
you
good
you
EVs?
say you say it's quite depressing, right? As this chat message comes in that says yes, any good EV news? Okay, well maybe we've got some.
Yeah, I actually have some good EV news to share with the world. What
Thank
should we
you.
do first, Zach? Hit on the headline and or wait for the people to show up and share them the good news to get the Monday off to a positive start.
Nope. Let's dig into
Nope.
what ISeeCars has to say. They did some interesting research.
Yes, ISeeCars analyzed used EV price data from January through July of 2021, and then that same time period in 2022. So we're looking at year over year used EV prices. And honestly, well, I'm just not even going to speculate on what's good, what's bad. Let's just talk about the facts, okay? So 54% used electric car prices are up 54% in 1 year. Surprised? No. Sad? Yes. Now, if we take a closer look at the data, we see that the price increases were across the board, but it varied from model to model, and we're going to dig into that in a moment. But how did they do this calculation and come up with such a bold headline-making number? They looked at 13.8 million used car prices. That's a lot. And what they found was that it's harder and harder to find an affordable EV. Zach, you and I know this, but for someone just entering the used car market and maybe they're thinking about going electric for the first time, there's a lot of sticker shock that is going on. I mean, the average EV transaction price for a new EV is like 66,000. Used EVs, it's hard to find anything under 30,000.
And this also comes on the heels of the new Inflation Reduction Act, which provided for the first time ever a used EV tax incentive. But you got to keep me honest here, Justin. What was the cap on that for the next 10 years?
The cap on the used EV incentive is just $4,000. But that's how much you can get. But you're talking about the vehicle price. The cap is 25,000, which is pathetic.
Okay, so if the cap is $25,000, then you have to buy it from a dealer. You can't buy it peer to peer. And this data from ISeeCars just came out. And I think for the same period of time, they said used car prices. And you say, keep this in mind. Like ISeeCars, sure, they analyze millions of listings and everything like that. But like the real important thing here is the difference, or as I like to say, the delta between ICE cars and EV cars. ICE cars year over year, they said were up like 10%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
And
yes.
EVs were up 50, what was it, 54?
EVs 54, ICE 10%. Yeah, that's wild. Huge
So,
difference.
and when you start to think about the future of EVs, like, sure, everything was up because of inflation over the past year. We totally get that. The car shortage, the whole nine yards, everything we always talk about. So everyone's informed about that. But what if, let's say, used car prices go back to, I don't know, appreciating 2% over the next year and then eventually depreciating again? Are EVs always going to be like 5x better in terms of appreciation or lack of depreciation? That's a scary thought with how in demand they are, how many people want them. And also, again, put that into context with the $25,000 cap. There's not even a single starting MSRP for an EV under $25,000, correct?
Yeah, and the most affordable ones, the Chevy Bolt at like 26,000 before add-ons and markups, and the Nissan Leaf at 27,800. Those are hard to find, and the Nissan Leaf is going to be discontinued at some point in 2023. We don't know the exact details, but yeah, it's getting harder to find any electric vehicle under $35,000. Now, here's what stood out to me when I looked at this data, and it looks like the conclusions that ISeeCars drew are a bit different than my own. They had
Let's
a
hear
lot
it.
more optimism with the future of EV prices. They said, EV prices are expected to come down. Zach, you and I have seen that it may be a while before that happens, maybe like 3 to 5 years. But here's what stood out to me besides that.
Hmm.
The EVs that saw the most appreciation in their pricing, used EVs, were the two most affordable options we just talked about, the Chevy Bolt and Nissan Leaf. They had prices going up by 29% and 45% respectively. So the average used Nissan Leaf was selling for $28,000. That is more than the base MSRP for a brand new Leaf.
Okay, so if I'm General Motors or if I'm Nissan or if I'm Ford, what am I doing? I'm raising my prices. And so that's what we're unfortunately seeing on the new car side is MSRPs continue to go up or base trim levels are not options anymore for consumers. It's really and unfortunately we're going to be beating this drum, I don't know, until an automaker comes out with the most basic of basic electric vehicles. Like truly the most basic of basic electric vehicles that can be found at an affordable price point because you just look at the landscape, Justin, there's no downward pressure on price. There really isn't downward pressure on price.
Yeah, this gets to the kind of epiphany I had last week. I was realizing, like,
Huh.
yeah, what does the future of EVs look like? And I realized EVs are going to fail because they're too expensive, or automakers are going to start to change their game plan and come up with lower range EVs because they have smaller battery packs, less raw materials in them, for a slightly lower price points. I think we're going to start to see the arrival in 2023 and 2024, at least the announcement of electric models that might get 200, 220 miles of range for $35,000. The Nissan Leaf currently is basically that, right? But it's going out the door. It's the Nissan Leaf is axed, right? But I think we're going to see more and more automakers bringing lower range options to market for a lower price point, and they still get to keep more of their battery supplies, their battery contract allocations for their higher priced EVs if they want to with longer range. But I think they're going to have to do that or EVs are going to fail.
Let's go to the chat here for a second. We've got from Mike Renz. Do you think Chevy is going to raise the price of the Bolt EUV for 2023?
My opinion is yes, because they had dropped the price by $6,000 to try to spur interest in the Chevy Bolt. That was before the tax credit was brought back for General Motors. The Chevy Bolt will qualify for at least half of the new tax credit, depending on where the battery minerals are from. It might qualify for the full 7,500. Now that tax credit news has made its way into everyone's thoughts and buying decisions, looking at EVs, I think General Motors is going to probably reverse that in 2023. Right now might be, well, let's see. Yeah, you should not buy a Bolt and expect the tax credit right now, because the 200,000 sale cap doesn't get eliminated until January 1st. I was about to say now might be the best time to buy, but no. I guess you got to wait till January and just hope that GM is nice and does not jack up the prices in the next 4 months.
Yeah, hope is a hell of a drug. Leon here. I heard a TV commentator talking about all the cheap EVs that are now available in a discussion about the California push. I think she needs to listen to YAA. And I like this comment from Susanna. Unless Chinese BYD gets to enter the market more aggressively, that's when we maybe would see prices come down. Injustice, BYD and NIO will come in and do what Japan did in the 70s and 80s. That's kind of a cool playbook to think about.
That is possible, yes. And because they're based in China doesn't mean that they're not going to, build American factories and things like that. We know that NIO already has a North American headquarters in California. So they're clearly thinking about this. Injustice, I think you might be onto something. It's exciting times ahead.
I mean, if you think about that, is what the Japanese automakers did back in the 70s and 80s. They came in, cheaper products, got mass market adoption. Now everyone loves Toyota, largest automaker in the globe. It would be interesting to see the same playbook executed here in EVs. And I think Learning Fast has hit it on the nail. EVs are getting more expensive, but EV sales have doubled in the last year. There is plenty of demand that will keep prices increasing. the fuel on the fire there is the cost to actually produce these vehicles continues to go up. So yeah, add those two combined, high supply or low supply, increasing cost to actually produce them, and increasing consumer demand. It's a recipe for not mass market adoption and appeal.
Yeah, it's pretty clear to me. Well, that's true. It's a recipe to hold down EV adoption, but it's also pretty clear to me that with such high demand and low inventory, prices are going to stay high through 2023 and possibly through 2024. Why do I think it could get better in 2024 and beyond? Because more and more automakers are going to be bringing their US plants online at that point. I know Hyundai, Honda, uh, Toyota's making battery plants in North Carolina. Just about every automaker, GM, Ford, they're all building new factories specifically for electrification. Will that drive EV prices down? Far from guaranteed. But if they play their cards right and hopefully raw material supply chains and battery supply chains improve by then, that's like 1.5 2 years from now, I think it's possible that we could see some stabilization. But Zach, another thing that stood out to me in the ISeeCars study, it's even more troubling, and keep this in mind if you're about to buy a used electric vehicle at inflated prices. This is a PSA for everyone. If you're going to be buying a Chevy Bolt or a Nissan Leaf or even a Kia Niro EV, Hyundai Kona EV at inflated prices, I'm talking like $30,000 for a 4-year-old EV. Keep in mind that these EV models, they're going to have slower charging capabilities. So 55, maybe 75 kilowatt charging speeds. That means you're going to sit there at the DC fast charger for 45 minutes to an hour. They don't have the best range, but they might have 150 to 240 miles of range. I think 250 is actually what you get with the Hyundai and Kia options, but it's not the best range. Those range and charging figures are going to become outdated 2, 3, 4 years from now. If you're ever going to try to sell that used EV, sell it to someone else in the future, you're going to be hit with significant depreciation. If you bought that for $30,000 in 2022, it might be worth, I'm just going to say it, might be worth $15,000 3 years from now, because of how faster charging, longer range options are coming to market, but especially the faster charging options. Nobody's going to want an EV that takes an hour to charge in 2025. Nobody's going to want it.
That everything you just said makes a ton of sense, but it is predicated on automakers being able to produce those new EVs at quantities that can make prices somewhat attainable. Otherwise, look at what's happening right now just in the market in general, Justin. The prices and the availability of sub $20,000, sub $15,000, sub $10,000 used cars. The reason those are so inflated is because there's so much demand for fuel efficient, affordable or price attainable vehicles. There's a world, Justin, where potentially what can happen here is consumers end up still buying those slower charging EVs because the availability of the newer models isn't actually there.
Yes, that is true. So a lot of assumptions I'm making here, but to me, it's more of a question of when will it happen? Will it happen 2 years from now? Will it happen a decade from now? I sure hope not. But at some point, those who are paying far more than they should for used EVs might suffer the consequences. But I also feel for them because I love driving electric. And, at what point is it worth it to just take the financial hit to drive electric, not pay for fuel? It's a complex calculation that everyone has to do to fit their own needs.
Let's answer Dale's question here, and then let's switch gears. Maybe some good news. Dale has a tax incentive question. We should mention, if you go to our videos here on the YAA Electric channel, there are plenty about the EV tax incentives. We did like a whole 2 weeks, I think, of just talking about the tax incentives. Not that we're disinterested in answering your question, Dale. Dale's question is, Justin, is the federal incentive per household or person every 3 years?
Yeah, we're talking about the used EV tax credit, which has a rule that says you can only use it once every 3 years per tax filer. So here's how that answer is interpreted. I'm not a tax professional, but it seems pretty clear to me. If you file your taxes individually, then you can buy one every 3 years. If you file it as a joint filing, so as a family, then that means your whole family can only buy one every 3 years. It's per tax filer. So that might be a reason to file taxes separately, because I know, like I said, not a tax professional, but I know the tax professionals do provide advice on when it makes sense to file your taxes individually or to file jointly. Looks like this is a new part of the equation they're going to have to look at if you're thinking about buying a used EV.
Darn it.
Sorry.
All right, Justin, good news. You got some good news for us today?
Yes, I do. I think this is lovely news coming out of Honda. Right now, the Honda Prologue, we're just waiting for it to make it to market. The Honda Prologue is an pretty awesome Ultium powered electric crossover. Guess who's gonna build the Honda Prologue? General Motors. General Motors is building this vehicle and powering it with its own Ultium batteries. Well, it looks like Honda is getting the ball rolling to get their own architecture battery platform and electric motor platform built in the United States of America, because Honda and LG have just announced a joint venture to build a $4.4 billion EV battery plant somewhere in the US. They're not announcing where at the current time, but they say construction starts in early 2023 and production would begin in 2025. That's about as quick as you can get for building a factory and getting production rolling. Will they meet their goals? I don't know, but they say it's going to have an annual capacity of 40 gigawatt hours of battery production. That is a ton. That is definitely considered a gigafactory.
I know you had done the research way back when, Justin, of automakers and their committed investments towards moving electric. 4.4 billion sounds
So
like a
much
lot of money.
Yeah.
But it actually, if I remember those numbers back from when you had done that research, it seems kind of small. Am I fair to say that?
I don't think it's small. No. I disagree respectfully. I mean, when we look at the numbers, automakers have invested, automakers that are active in the United States, we're not talking about BYD, none of those. I'm not talking about NIO. They've invested over $500 billion in electrification. $4.4 billion for one battery factory. To me, that's a lot. I mean, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, and that's a lot of capacity that you mentioned as well. When would we expect anything to come out of that? I mean, we're talking 3 to 5 years from now,
They
right?
said 2025 to have the first production.
That's incredible. That's incredible if you can actually do it.
Yeah, that's pretty fast. I know that Tesla has been ramping up production of their 4680 cells at Giga Austin, but that's been a slow ramp up process. It's hard, at least from what I've read online. It's difficult for Tesla to get into the battery making business when that's not what they've been doing for the past 10 years. They've been relying on Panasonic, LG, CATL out of China. Now that they're building their own new cells, they're going through a whole new learning process. And I wonder how much Honda is going to be leaning on LG to do this, to make batteries.
What do you make of Leon's comment here? So we will have 20 EV battery plants that can't get raw materials instead of 5 who can't.
It's a justified comment. I know that there are lithium mines that are slated for construction, or they're going to start mining and get the permitting approved in North Carolina, New Mexico, Wyoming, Nevada. Nevada's a big one, maybe even Arizona. But so my background, 5-10 years ago, is in environmental science, and I know that a lot of permitting has to be approved to get any kind of mine opened, right?
Yeah.
It could take 2 to 3, maybe even 5 years to get a mine started. We could not see that there's a possibility that domestic lithium production and other raw materials, they may not increase domestically for 2 to 5 years just because of permitting processes. I mean, this all goes to support what you're saying, Leon.
Well, and it also, I know we're talking about good news, and it is great that there's investment in the United States. But when you look at these tax incentives again, because pretty much all the news and all the decision making around what these companies, automakers, battery producers, raw materials exporters, their decision making is now being influenced by the Inflation Reduction Act. And really, that was a domestic production act. Like, that's exactly what it was. And ultimately, the outcome of that could mean, I don't know, I'm going to say 2 to 4, maybe 3 to 5 years of actual challenges to buy EVs, ultimately followed up by a period of the roaring 20s is what I'm thinking of for EVs. Like, it could be that, but we've got to take a few years here to do, I don't know, permitting so that we can actually produce the materials domestically.
Yeah, things have changed so much in the past year, haven't they? And a lot of it was, well, of course, COVID, but then the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Yep.
I mean, I'll speak for myself. I thought that the golden age of EVs would be like 2022 through 2024, but then so many things happened that really just screwed up supply chains in a big way. Now, I'm going to think that it's going to be from 2025 to 2030. Why? Not only are you, assuming I'm assuming that supply chains are going to be mostly fixed or reimagined. They could be just reimagined supply chains, more domestically centered. That could be a good thing.
Mhm.
Um, you should have a lot more options on the market. Competition tends to drive down prices, but I think that's only going to happen if we see more direct to consumer sales. That's a whole nother topic, but I think it's possible. And then you've also got the innovation that's happening between now and the second half of this decade. Toyota has already said they're going to bring solid state batteries into plug-in hybrids in 2025. Solid state batteries might actually make it into full EVs in the second half of this decade. I think they probably will. So you've got innovation, more competition. Hopefully, supply chains are fixed some way or another by then. It looks like the golden age of EVs is going to be the latter half of this decade.
2027 to 2032. Happy Hippo. That's my guess. Happy Hippo. Hi, all. I am late to the party. Are we still saying it is a good idea to buy an EV now or just wait a few years? And this is what I love, Justin, about the YAA community. Learning Fast says buy one now only if it currently gets the full tax credit. Wait till January 2023 if you're planning to get a Tesla Model Y. What's your take on this advice?
Yeah, so Happy Hippo, great question. In order to answer it, we would need to know which electric vehicles you're thinking about purchasing, because the answer is so convoluted, so complex that it's kind of useless for me to spout out a generalized answer. Because as learning fast said in the chat, if you're looking for a Tesla Model Y, you're going to want to wait till January. If you wanted to get a Rivian, you would have wanted to buy it like a few weeks ago. The answer depends on which electric vehicle you're looking at and if you're looking at new or used. So that's another reason why we have the wonderful electric vehicle forum over at the YAA community. So check it out at joinyaa.com. If you're thinking about buying a new or used EV, we've got conversations going in the chat every day talking about what makes the most sense in this crazy, crazy world we live in.
And I also just dropped in the chat, Justin did a fantastic job. All of the EVs that qualify for tax credits and those that don't and those that will, and all the complexity that you were just speaking to, Justin, great guide right there. If you go to just joinyaa.com/EV, it'll take you directly to that guide. And then, like you said, joinyaa.com/community. Great conversations happening there because it's so much complexity.
Yes.
Yep, here you go.
Yep.
Right
And here's another one. When should you buy an EV? We broke down exactly how the new tax credit affects each of the automakers in this article. So I want to make sure and share that with everyone too. Yeah, it's complicated. That would be a whole show in itself if we were to get into that.
Something tells me it could be a video coming to you soon. It sounds pretty useful. All right, let's talk. Well, first, was there any other good news? I don't want to keep going down kind of the path that I was going to take us. Any other good news?
Honestly, that's all that I saw.
The Honda story was the good news.
Yeah, we'll have more by Wednesday, I'm sure.
Yeah, hopeful. My fingers are definitely crossed. I wanted to bring up infrastructure just for a second as well, because we were talking about $500 billion committed towards electric vehicles, battery production, etc. The major story I've heard on the infrastructure front, Justin, is the federal funding for the, and keep me honest here, what's the name of the plan?
NEVI, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure. It's all based on the bipartisan infrastructure law.
And you got to keep me honest here again. How much money was divvied up for NEVI?
$7.5 billion to be allocated over 5 years to all the states and the District of Columbia, and I believe Puerto Rico too.
That's really cool. Okay, but the reason I wanted to bring that up, and thank you for being an encyclopedia full of electric vehicle news and knowledge, that is 1/10, 1/9 of what's being, quote, invested in electric vehicle production. You're really never going to see electric vehicles get more mainstream, I don't think, until, we talked about prices coming down, but also that you have that. We know from research that we've read, it's actually not price that's the biggest thing to keeping people away from purchasing an EV. It's actually the infrastructure piece. We've got 1/9 the amount of funding going towards that than there is for the actual production.
Yeah, but when you look at it like this, the impact of increasing EV infrastructure, specifically charging infrastructure, could be just disproportionate. It could be massive. For example, in my state, West Virginia, we've only got like 1.6 million people in the state, but it's got one of the lowest EV adoption rates in the nation. I believe the only state that's lower is Wyoming. But anyways,
wow. Right
now, the only DC fast chargers in this entire state are 10 Tesla superchargers. That's great for Tesla, right? But what about those of us who can't afford a Tesla? The NEVI funding plan for our state, West Virginia, says that by 2025, they're installing between 60 and 90 DC fast chargers that are open to everyone. That's going from 10 to 90, or 10 to 100, 10 plus 90 in 5 years. That is massive, right?
Yeah,
So I
fair.
think the impact could be pretty huge, especially if you live outside of a major metropolitan area. Right now, if you live in any big city in the United States, there are fast chargers near you. Do they work? That's another topic. But yeah.
Well, that's another story. Didn't you share that news on Slack internally about Electrify America essentially coming out and saying, we don't know if we're going to have a better plan for maintaining our infrastructure?
Yeah, I really want to get Kyle Connor from Out of Spec Motoring on this show, get a live interview going, because he really called them out in a video with hundreds of thousands of views. Just 2 weeks ago, he called out Electrify America saying, "Hey, I know the executives at Electrify America." That's what he said. You guys need to be more transparent, because he was sick and tired of pulling up to Electrify America stations and chargers not working, or they malfunction after 2 minutes of charging. I've experienced that firsthand. From what I've seen, it's about 1 out of every 3 charging sessions something goes wrong. That's pathetic. Imagine if gas stations did that. So yeah, that's got to be fixed. That's I don't know, Zach. It's stressing me out just talking about it.
We can move on, but 1 out of 3. Wow, I didn't realize that there were like, and I guess not all the issues are material or major, but like still an issue nonetheless.
Well, anecdotal evidence. I mean, I've only started keeping track recently. When I went and picked up my dad at the Charlotte airport in North Carolina, I charged twice, once on the way down, once on the way back. And out of those 2 charging sessions, one of the sessions screwed up halfway through and said I needed to disconnect and try again. So it's just something I'm used to, and I hate it. But I love. What's that?
I was gonna say, like, any did it like tell you anything?
No.
Like, why?
It said what it says is charging session error. That pops up on the screen. You unplug, plug it back in, and it usually works. Sometimes you have to hop in your car and pull to the station next to you. It's ridiculous. This is one of the things that I will never sugarcoat when it comes to EV ownership, is public charging infrastructure sucks if you don't have a Tesla.
Wow. All right. Well, why don't we call it here for a show, Justin? We'll be back on Wednesday. I can't imagine what we'll be talking about then. Ideally, more good news. If you want to check out the ISeeCars data, just go to ISeeCars.com. Click on research. It shows up right there. Maybe we'll pop it in the description down below as well. You're already probably one step ahead of me, Justin.
I must say, Zach, that if you guys are watching this, after noon Eastern time on, what day is today? I don't know. Monday, August 29th. We're going to have this guide to the new ISeeCars data. It's fascinating. Down in the comments below, take a look at that. But I know, Zach, I feel bad because so much of this show is about negativity, and that's really on me because there's a lot of bad news when it comes to EV world. However, I want to leave the viewers and listeners with a bit of a guide that might help them feel more positive about the future of EVs. This is,
I love it,
YAA's guide to every state's EV charging infrastructure plan. These plans were just released in the past few months. So check it out in the chat right now. I'll drop a link down in the comments. And if you're listening to us on the wonderful podcast, thank you for being here. Check out joinyaa.com and you'll find every state's EV charging plan.
You're good, man. You got all the resources. You've built an incredible collection of information here, Justin. Kudos to you.
That's all good. I still get confused between amps and kilowatts and volts. So I'm trying my best, Zach. I'm trying my best. We're getting there.
All right, guys. We'll be back on Wednesday. Justin, have a happy and good Monday. I'll talk to you later on today.
Yep. See you later. Thanks, Zach.
See you guys.